Hello there, my lovely jewelry makers. I'm Christina at CSLdesigns, and today I'm going to show you how to make this Celtic wirework cabochon. So we're basically going to be capturing a cabochon, but then adding this lovely Celtic design over the top of it. So it's almost as if the cabochon is the background and the wirework is the main design feature. Which is why for this design I really enjoy using materials that contrast nicely against each other. So if you want to learn how to make it, then keep watching. So these are the materials that we'll need. Now I have two different wires here. So first of all, this is a thicker gauge. It's a 1mm square wire that I'm using. You can also use say a 0.8mm. It's going to give you a slightly finer look to it. And then here I have a 0.8mm half round wire. And now this is just what I've chosen to work with for this. You can also make this design using regular round wire. It's just going to give you a slightly different look. And of course we can't forget, we also need our cabochon. So here I'm using an oval shaped cabochon that measures about 3 by 4 centimeters. Again, you don't have to use the specific size, it's just what I'm using, but you can easily customize this design to fit other sizes as well. So don't forget to check out the description box below the video for the material list and links that might be useful. Otherwise, let's get our wire and our cabochon ready and let's get started. So then first of all here, I've cut 4 lengths of my square wire of about 30 centimeters each. Now of course the lengths of these will depend on the size of the cabochon you're using as well. And what we then need to do with these 4 wires here is basically connect them together. So first of all, I just want to make sure the ends are even. And then I'm just going to lay them next to each other here. And I then want to get to about the middle of the wire. So you can measure that or do it by eye. And then what I want to do is cut a length of my half round wire, and this is just a short little length, not really specific, maybe about 10 to 15 centimeters or so. Because I'm just going to use the short length to attach these 4 square wires together. So, using this half round wire at the midpoint of the square wires here, I'm going to lay the half round wire obviously with the flat side down against the square wires. Now it can be a bit fiddly because obviously the square wires are loose still, but just hold them together the best you can and then start to wrap this half round wire around, making sure the square wires are literally laying right up against each other. And then I just want to bring the half round wire around so like that. And what I like to do is make sure as I do my wraps here, just push it down against the square wires because it helps making sure everything is laying how we want it to, and also kind of tightens this half round wire against the square wires. So I'm just going to wrap around like this a few times, making sure I keep this half round wire with that flat side against the square wires there. So it's really up to you how many times you want to wrap around. Again, remember, just squeeze that nice and tight, kind of flatten it down. So I would say I'm going to be wrapping 4 or 5 times or so. And let me have a look, 1, 2, 3, 4, I think this is going to be the 5th. And let me just flatten that down. So we have something a bit like that. Now what you can do is if you find that you've ended up doing this not quite in the middle, you can just gently move it along the wires. But obviously the aim is to kind of have this on the square wires really as tight as possible. So maybe get it in position and then just flatten it down like that. And then once we have it in place, it's time to get rid of the excess of this half round wire, because all we need this little length for is basically wrapping around to connect them together like this. So what I want to make sure to do is end both of the ends of the wire here on the same side. So I'm just bringing this around so it's the end is on the same side as the other end. Just flatten that down, and then I'm going to go in and take my flush cutters here, and I want to cut the end down so when the end is left on the wire, it's going to basically be in the middle of the square wires. So I cut it so the very end is right there, if you can see. And then we just want to make sure to go in on that very end of half round wire and push that down nice and tight. And then of course we do the same on the other end as well. So just go in and cut it off in the middle on the same side here, and then just squeeze it down. And then we've done it on the same side because this is going to now be facing in towards the cabochon. So basically the ends are going to be out of the way, if you imagine, instead of having them being on the outside, so they can end up catching or scratching on something like clothes or skin. So these are nice and flat now, and we have all the wires nicely wrapped together, so they're sitting literally right next to each other, side by side. So now we need to start shaping these wires here. So I'm going to bring in the cabochon, because we might as well use the cabochon itself to shape the wires around, because obviously that's the shape that we want them to get, at least some of them. Now what we need to do is for this little connection point with the half round wire to be placed at the bottom, or one of the ends or sides, or however you want to look at it, of the cabochon. And then basically we want to start shaping them around the sides. Now you can also, and that sometimes works out a little bit better depending how fiddly you might find it, put your cabochon down on a surface, ideally something a little bit soft but still firm, like this here I'm using my macrame board, and then just place that part of the wire at the very bottom, hold everything in place, and then start to bring these around the sides. And basically, like I said, use the cabochon itself as a guide. So it's not too crucial that it's perfect right now. We just kind of want to get them into more or less the area. And I'm just going to kind of start a bit like this, because what I'm then going to do is focus on only some of the wires for now, because I want to then get the back wire. So just picking that one out there, the very wire that's furthest back on both sides, which is obviously the same wire that's running through down here, but that's the one I want to focus on right now. So I'm just going to kind of single that out, and then I want to make sure that that wire is more precisely following the shape of the cabochon. So I'm then going to not really worry about the other ones just yet. I just want this wire specifically to basically lay around the outside edge of the cabochon and create more or less a frame. So a bit like that on one side, go to the other side, again making sure I grab the back wire, and I have that, you can call it connection point, at the very bottom, and then I bring this around as well. Now like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect straight away, just take our time. We can always adjust things. Bring that around, so basically they're crossing over at the top now, and then it's literally a matter of adjusting this. So we want these to sit pretty much flush all the way around the cabochon, and obviously follow the shape nicely as well. So just keep doing that until you feel you have that frame nicely in place. Then once you're happy with the shape, obviously it kind of springs open a little bit, but when we push it against the cabochon itself, then we need to deal with the top of these same wires. So hold the cabochon in place and bring just one wire at a time here to sit exactly around the cabochon like we want. And then I'm going to grab my tweezer nose pliers And we basically want to put a bend in the wire at the top, and it's going to be, if you can imagine, kind of in the very middle of this part of the cabochon. So basically straight opposite this connection point down here. And that's going to then be for the bail. So just hold everything in place. Like I said, it can be a little fiddly. Put your pliers in there. And then just want to bring the wire straight up like that. And of course we just need to do the same with the other side. So again, push that tight against the cabochon so we know where we need to place that bend. Just some of these other wires getting a little bit in the way, but can manage that. So figure out where you need to put the bend. And also it can help looking from the back, because that's where obviously you can actually see the wire that we're working with. And then bend that in the same way. And then basically you want to just make sure that this is correct, basically. So you can just take a bit of time, double check that. Because what we then need to do is actually connect them together up here. So we need to make sure that this frame is completely the right shape around the cabochon. So where they meet up right up here, they basically meet perfectly with the shape sitting just nicely around the cabochon as well. So now I've got the shape in place here. You can see it's going to sit nicely. What we then need to do is connect these two wires at the top so the frame basically stays in place. And for that I'm just going to cut another length of my half round wire here, and this is about 30 centimeters long. So I'm grabbing my frame as well, and then we want to basically start same principle as we did down at the bottom. Now it's just only two wires next to each other, connecting them here, sitting right next to each other. So also make sure these two wires that we bent upwards, they're coming up straight and are going to sit nice and neatly next to each other like that, because that means we can then take a half round wire here and start wrapping around these two square wires, again making sure they are right next to each other, and then we are connecting these two wires at the top by again wrapping in the exact same way. And here I also want to go in and then flatten down as I go, and you can always just push your wraps downwards a bit there towards where the bends are. Now we don't need to go all the way down, but we'll get to that. But basically now what we need to do is keep wrapping here, so obviously the attachment and connection becomes stronger, but also this is actually going to end up becoming the bail. So basically I want to wrap a decent length here that we can then bend to create the bail, and it's really up to you as well, obviously, how you want yours to be, so how large you want the bail to be. Now keep in mind the length that we need to wrap here is basically about double of what we actually want the final bail to be, because it's going to get folded over. So just keep wrapping like this, making sure your wraps are literally tight next to each other and not overlapping or anything. That's what this squeezing with the pliers are also good for, is making sure that the wire sits exactly how we want it to. So now I'll wrap the length I need there for my bail, and what I'm then going to do is just going to flip it around to the back, and this little end of the wire where we started out initially, I'm just going to bring around to the back, And again, just flatten anything down and then just cut off the excess. And same principle as down here. This is going to be the side where I finish off the wire. So I'm going to cut it in the middle, kind of basically between the two square wires there. And then just make sure to flatten down that wire end. And then you can see I have a little bit of space down here. So what I'm going to do now is basically shape the bail. And for that you can really use anything, but I'm just grabbing a crochet hook that I got handy here, and this is quite a small one because I just want the bail to not be too large. Then I'm going to place this behind the bail. Again, this is looking from the front, so this is going to be the front of the piece. I'm placing this behind, so just to reference that these other square wires are on the front side here. We'll place it behind, just slightly below the middle of this wrapped section, and then start to push it back on itself over the top of the, in this case, crochet hook here, and then continue until basically the two ends of the wrapped section meet up there. And you can see I'm literally just using this crochet hook to brace it to make sure I get a bit of space here that's going to be able to put a chain through, whether it's a pre-made chain or something you make yourself. But then I have the two ends laying kind of on top of each other there now. What I then want to do is just push them as tight together as possible. You might have to then push these bare, or non-wrapped rather, square wires back out a little bit so you can really get them pushed down there. Then I'm going to take the length that I have left of the half round here and basically do another wrap, but this time I'm going to go around both this end of the bail and also the first part of the bail where we started out. And I'm literally just going to bring this around below the other wraps where I just had a little bit of spacing, so it's just going to blend in nicely. And I'm doing this nice and tight. I just want to make sure I bring it around, and that's basically going to keep the two ends of the bail locked together. So something like that. One should be fine. If you have space for more than one, you can always wrap it again. But then I'm back here where these two lengths of wires that I was wrapping to create the bail, I'm now just gonna go back to wrapping around those a couple of times. Yeah, scrap all the way there. Again, making sure I'm wrapping and the wraps are nice and flat next to each other. Just making sure I have that connection point in place, and then make my wraps nice and tight. So you can see we've connected the two ends of the bail basically, but it's nice and seamless. So just wrap. I'm just going to do one more at least, just because it's going to make it just that little bit more secure. And then of course don't forget to squeeze your wraps flat. And as you can see here, my other wires are kind of going a bit all over the place. Don't worry about them. Just make sure you don't push anything completely out of whack, but kind of just focus on this area that we're working on right now. So when you're happy and feel like this is nice and strong and secure, then we just gotta finish off the wire. And for that, again, I'm going to get my flush cutters, and you just want to make sure that the half round wire there is on. Again, this isn't looking from the front, so it's going to be on the inside of these two wires. So I'm just going to kind of do that final wrap. So if we're looking from the back here, it's on the other side. Same principles, because just to let you know, the cabochon is going to sit on top of that, so it's going to hide the end of the wire. Then cut off the excess by cutting down the middle. Like that, and squeeze the end down. And that is basically now the bail in place. So one of the first things that I just want to focus on is actually fastening these two wires I have coming straight down the back, because that will help kind of create a backing and firm up the frame more, because it will also then be able to hold the cabochon in place. So when we need to kind of create the design, and if we want to put the cabochon in to help kind of see how it's going to look, we have that already sealed up, these two wires here, so it's going to be less fiddly to work with basically. So I want to get those two just fastened in place, so I'm just going to go to the front. Now we did already partly shape these other wires. What I'm just going to do is start to making sure that this wrap at the bottom is straight opposite the bail. The front wires, so if you can see there, the ones at the very front, I'm just going to start to bring them in a little bit more towards each other. Again, not a final design or anything yet, it's just to kind of start to get the wires a bit more into the place where they're actually going to sit. And then also the next ones, which is the middle of the three wires that we have left here. And it's kind of just to begin with to create a bit of spacing here. So I'm just bringing these wires in because I basically want the back wire of the three left. You can kind of see a bit from the bottom there. These ones there to be a bit more free, because those are the ones that I want to attach these two lengths around. So first of all here, I'm going to just separate them a little bit, kind of split them open so they go each towards their own side. And then basically making sure we don't have any bends or kinks that we don't want to have. And they're still kind of coming towards the bottom, but a little bit out to the side. And you can add a bit of a curve into the wire if you want to, which you could do by just running basically your finger down it. Just warms it up a bit and just adds a slight gentle curve. What we then need to do is, I think I just want to add the cabochon just for now, to help a little bit with the shape, and making sure as well, for instance, that the frame keeps its shape as well. Because if I start to manipulate some wire, you could risk kind of pushing the frame out of shape, which obviously we don't want. So if we're looking from the front here, you can then see the two wires sticking out at the bottom on each their own side. What I then want to do is start to bring them up from the back towards the front, making sure it's in the same or similar as possible place. And obviously if we use that wrap at the bottom there for reference as the midpoint, but then bringing up the wires there so we can get them to a point where they can actually wrap around those two bottom ones that we want. Now I just want to double check the back, see if that still looks somewhat symmetrical. And if you're happy with how it's looking so far, I basically want to start to bring them in over the front a little bit. And then we need to go and cut off the excess basically. But we want to leave a short little length because we need that to be able to bend it around. So rather cut off too little and have too long a length left, because you can always cut off more. Then the opposite. So something like that. You can then see I only have a short wire, or shorter than the other side, sticking up, and I want to do the same on the other side as well. Because I'm cutting them off now, because once we kind of bend them, we can't really get in there with our pliers. And then just take the tweezer nose and start to, again, the point of having pushed these in straight away is to create a bit more space for us here to work with. But I then want to grab the end of that wire that I just cut off and kind of bend it downwards. If you can then imagine, I'm wanting it to wrap around this wire. So that's the wire that's basically next to the wire that we have the frame for. Now I can see this is probably a little bit too long still, so I can go in and cut off a little bit more. Like I said, rather that than having cut it too short straight away. So let's try again. Straighten it up and go in and kind of force the wire into place, literally kind of making it hook around this length of wire. And you basically just want to keep working with this until that wire is hooked around this wire in the frame. And of course the same with the other side. Just try and remove that cabochon, see if that might work a little bit better. You can see more what we're doing. Grab the very tip and then start to bend it inwards. And again, of course, we don't want it to hook over the top of these two, so kind of push them out of the way and just get it to hook around the next one down. So if you can see the principle there, obviously this is still a bit loose, so I think also here I can cut off a little bit more. So I can tighten up this little kind of hook more around the specific wire that I want it to. So once you hook those wires around, it's time to deal with the design at the front of the cabochon. So I'm keeping the cabochon in there to help also for the frame to hold its shape, but also to kind of obviously be able to see what it's going to look like. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I've already started the shaping of them a little bit. So the two front wires here, I'm going to take first, and the right one, if we're looking from the front, I'm going to start with, and that's currently crossing underneath, but that's what it's going to end up being as well, and bring it further over. So basically tightening it around that bottom wrap there. And also I'm going to do the same with the other one. So just bring them further over to the sides, and they're crossing over each other there. So my right one is crossing underneath and the left one is crossing over. And you basically just want to tighten this up until we have kind of a little loop shape here at the bottom. And the wires are going out to basically opposite sides of where they're coming from. So we can always do more, but for now we're going to leave it here. Then I'm going to take the right wire of the next ones in. And in this case here, I just need to grab it and actually bring it over the top of the one that's coming from the other side that we just dealt with. I'm going to bring it over the top of that and then over towards the opposite side there even more so as well. So again, just tightening it up, down around this connection point down here. I'm going to do the same with the equivalent one on the other side, but here we just need to have a look, because I want to make sure for the design at the front that all the wires are basically going over, under, regardless of the pattern. So it's already going underneath the first one, which is good, because if you're looking at the overlapping ones next to that, that's the opposite. So that's what we want. So I'm going to make sure though that it goes over the next one. So it goes under and then over. And then once we have that, I want to bring it further over to the other side. Now obviously, because we're working with wire as well, the wires aren't going to intertwine as easily with each other as say cord would. So what I'm also going to do is start to kind of push say a wire down a bit if another wire needs to cross over it. So just to kind of get them into position with each other, because obviously they won't do that as naturally as say cord would. But we have something like this in place for now. Then we need to take the last two that are the ones on the side, which are the ones that we hooked the wire from the back around. And if we just have a look, if we look at this crossover point, the first one that we have next to where this wire is going to come, that is this wire that's coming out to the side is coming underneath, which means it needs to go over the one that I'm going to be bringing to the other side there. Maybe it sounds a bit confusing, but it's basically just over, under, and it's all opposite each other. So if you can see, as I'm bringing this over, this goes underneath, whereas the previous one, it went over. So it's just opposite that. And then also that means it goes over this next one here. And then I'm just slightly bringing that to the opposite side. And then of course the same with the other side. Now here I have 3 wires, and if we're just looking at that, I can tell that this connection, well, overlapping point rather, the wire going out to the side comes over, so that means it needs to go underneath the next one. So this very outer wire I need to bring all the way in to come over that first one. And that's the point where you can see they're kind of sticking up quite a bit from the cabochon. So first of all, I want to push down that inner wire, kind of get it as tight to the cabochon as possible, and then I can push this down against that as well, because then it'll be in a better position to bring underneath the next one. And because it's all over, under, it's over the last one. And then towards the opposite side there. And then we can slowly start to see the effect that we're going to get. And you can see all of the wires are literally opposite, over, under. And obviously that's, you can double check that as well to make sure that they're like that. Whereas if they're not, if you discover that at some point maybe a wire's gone over multiple times, then you can just check that now and adjust anything we need to before moving on, obviously, because you can't do it once we've kind of move on and fasten the wires in place, of course. So just kind of maneuver your wires however you need to. Obviously check that everything is sitting correctly. And basically we've created this little kind of square or diamond shape in the middle with multiple diamond shapes within it. And we want that to basically be in about the middle of the cabochon, so as much as possible. So that means, just to use that as reference, this little kind of first little loop that we made, we also kind of want to have the equivalent spacing on the other side of that diamond shape in the middle. So you can just kind of use that to know exactly where the wires need to go. But once we're kind of getting there, you also can decide how tight you want this to be, because you can obviously pull all the wires tighter together. It's completely up to you and how you want yours to look. But once you're more or less happy with it, then I'm going to start bringing the wires towards the top here and obviously finish off the whole design. So I'm going to start with the two inner ones in the middle, and I just want to bring these around close to the bail, because this section is going to emulate this inner little loop that we made, which was the first one, the first wires that we started moving. And just bring them around the bail there, but then take the next wires out. Just start on one side at a time. Now this one here is equivalent to the one in the middle down here. That's right underneath that inner loop. So you kind of want to bring that into a similar position so it looks and emulates that other side. And the same with the top one here. And we're bringing them all towards the back of the cabochon, which is where I'm going to end up finishing them off as well. And then I'm going to take the very outer ones and have it sitting so here it's equivalent to that side. Same with the top. So then I just want to start finishing off the wires on the back there. So first of all, I'm going to focus on the two inner ones from the front. So they are coming down around towards the back, literally right next to the bail. So what I'm going to do is go in, you can always move the others a little bit out of the way, and I want to cut off the excess so we have, let's get that out of the way, just a little length coming from the front and kind of hooking around the back. So something a little bit like that. And you can kind of see it just hooking around the back there. Same thing, just cut the other one down like that. And then we just want to, because right now they're sticking out a little bit, so I just want to bring them in so the ends kind of end up in towards some of these wires that are part of the bail. Again, they are kind of hooking around the frame, basically, you could say, right next to the bail on either side. Now I just want to grab my tweezernose pliers because I just want to open up these wires on the back a bit, because right now they are basically, as you can see, right flush against the cabochon. I just want to create a little bit of space, so just kind of get your pliers in where you can and just open them a little bit. Same with the other one. And that is basically just so we're able to get the other wires underneath there, because we need to attach them around those two. So bring that further around to the back there, making sure it stays in position on the front. And then what I want to do is, like I said, we need to hook it around the other wires here that are already on the back. Now really, you can choose to do this in a different way yourself. It's completely up to you. The aim is literally for all these wires to get attached securely on the back, and it really doesn't matter how you do it. It's obviously, like I said, up to you, but I'm just going to show you how I'm doing it here in this case. So I want to keep this pretty simple. So I'm bringing it from the left side here towards the right, going over the top of the two wires, and then I'm going to go back underneath the right one of them, and that's going to grab onto that, and then bring it through, just nice and gentle, so it basically loops back underneath that wire. And I'm just going to bring it all the way up towards the top here. And again, just double checking how it's looking on the front. If we need to adjust anything, do that as we go. And then I'm just going to bring it around again to basically secure it more. I'm not going to bring the end underneath. I'm just going to kind of bring it around, double check in the front. Pretty happy with how that's sitting. And basically I just want to cut off the excess now and then be able to secure it. So I'm cutting off the excess again, making sure there's a short little tail left. And then taking my tweezer nose, and because right now it's looping around that wire on the back, but it's kind of doing it quite loosely, so I literally just want to tighten this around. And I'm just going to use my pliers for that. To gradually push the wire, and also the end here then basically loops around and kind of comes downwards and inwards towards the cabochon. And again, so that means it's going to be hidden and not catching up, scratching on clothes or skin. So again, run over with your fingers anytime you do something like this to make sure you can't feel it, because if you can feel it with your finger, then you know you need to just tuck it away a bit more. If you can't feel it, then it should be good. So that's that one. Of course, there's the equivalent one on the other side. Making sure it's coming from the front there, crossing from now the opposite side over the top of the two wires to the opposite side of where it's coming from. This end, just bring it back underneath. Now this wire, obviously the opposite to the one that we just worked with, and then just repeat that what we just did there with this one. And then with the last two wires there, I'm literally just going to do the same thing. So of course, checking that the front looks nice. Bring it around the back, going from one side over the top of the two wires in the back towards the opposite side, and then bringing that end of the wire back underneath to loop around the wire here on the back. And then just get it into position. Again, double checking that it stayed nice on the front. And then otherwise, same thing. Bring the wire around as if it was going to loop around one more time. But instead of actually bringing the wire through, just cut off the excess, leaving a short little tail. Like that. And then just tighten that up. And obviously bring that wire end towards the back so it's not sticking out like it is right now, but actually tucked away. So same principle as the ones that I just showed you before. And then of course there's that very final wire. So just bring it around from the front, cross over to the opposite side, and then loop around this other wire on the back and cut off the excess. And then once you've done that, the cabochon is almost more or less done. And then just here at the end, the final thing left to do, if it's necessary, is these two wires that are coming down the back of the cabochon that we brought out to be able to wrap the other wires around. If they are still sticking out quite a bit, like you can see here, there's quite a bit of gap between the wires and the cabochon itself, which could make the cabochon a little bit loose. All you want to do is push them back in. So flatten them back towards the cabochon as much as possible. And obviously we do have these wires wrapping around, creating a bit of a gap, at least towards the top. Otherwise just flatten them down towards the cabochon to make it sit a bit tighter again. And otherwise, that is now your cabochon done and ready to just add whatever kind of chain you want to and ready to wear. So we've achieved this lovely Celtic inspired wirework cabochon where we have the cabochon almost as the background and the design with the wire itself as the main feature. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Now if you like Celtic designs in general, I do have loads of them on my channel already, so feel free to check them out. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching this one, and I'll see you in the next one.